Hi friends, this is Laura with Potpourri of Life. I hope you're having a great start to your new year. Today what I want to share with you is a story. I printed it off. I found it on Facebook through one of my friends that had posted it. And it's really eye-opening. If you have an elderly parent that you're struggling with, or if this can apply to anybody that you just don't understand and they're always kind of snappy, or maybe sometimes it's just an occasion. Maybe you meet people on the road that you don't understand and you think like you're at the store and they're just plain nasty. Sometimes we need to step back and say, okay, what could be going wrong? Or simply we just need to be kind. Well, I don't know who wrote this story. The title is called Cheyenne. And there was no credit given anywhere, so this is not, I will not take credit for this story. But it's enough for me to say it's important to hear, it's important to read. So here I go. "Watch out, you nearly broadsided that car," my father yelled at me. "Can't you do anything right?" Those words hurt worse than blows. I turned my head toward the elderly man in the seat beside me, daring me to challenge him. A lump rose in my throat as I averted my eyes. I wasn't prepared for another battle. "I saw the car, Dad. Please don't yell at me when I'm driving." My voice was measured and steady, sounding far calmer than I really felt. My dad glared at me, then turned away and settled back. At home, I left Dad in front of the television and went outside to collect my thoughts. Dark, heavy clouds hung in the air with a promise of rain. The rumble of distant thunder seemed to echo my inner turmoil. What could I do about him? Dad had been a lumberjack in Washington and Oregon. He had enjoyed being outdoors and had reveled in pitting his strength against the forces of nature. He had entered grueling lumberjack competitions and had placed on often in them. The shelves in his house were filled with trophies that attested to his prowess. The years marched on relentlessly. The time he couldn't lift a heavy log, he joked about it. But later, that same day, I saw him outside alone, straining to lift it. He became irritable whenever anyone teased him about his advancing age, or when he couldn't do something he had done as a younger man. 4 days after his 67th birthday, he had a heart attack. An ambulance sped him to the hospital while a paramedic administered CPR to keep blood and oxygen flowing. At the hospital, Dad was rushed into an operating room. He was lucky. He survived. But something inside Dad died. His zest for life was gone. He obstinately refused to follow doctor's orders. Suggestions and offers of help were turned aside with sarcasm and insults. The number of visitors thinned, then finally stopped altogether. Dad was left alone. My husband Dick and I asked Dad to come live with us on our small farm. We hoped the fresh air and rustic atmosphere would help him adjust. Within a week after he moved in, I regretted the invitation. It seemed nothing was satisfactory. He criticized everything I did. I became frustrated and moody. Soon I was taking my pent-up anger out on Dick. We began to bicker and argue. Alarmed, Dick sought out our pastor and explained the situation. The clergyman set up weekly counseling appointments for us. At the close of each session, he prayed, asking God to soothe Dad's troubled mind. But the months wore on and God was silent. Something had to be done, and it was up to me to do it. The next day I sat down with the phone book and methodically called each of the mental health clinics listed in the yellow pages. I explained my problem to each of the sympathetic voices that answered in vain. Just when I was giving up hope, one of the voices suddenly exclaimed, "I just read something that might help you. Let me go get that article." I listened as she read. The article described a remarkable study done at a nursing home. All of the patients were under treatment for chronic depression, yet their attitudes had improved dramatically when they were given responsibility for a dog. I drove to the animal shelter that afternoon. After I filled out a questionnaire, a uniformed officer led me to the kennels. The odor of disinfectant stung my nostrils as I moved down the row of pens. Each contained 5 to 7 dogs. Long-haired dogs, curly-haired dogs, black dogs, spotted dogs, all jumped up, trying to reach me. I studied each one, but rejected one after another for various reasons. Too big, too small, too much hair. As I neared the last pen, a dog in the shadows of the far corner struggled to his feet, walked to the front of the run, and sat down. It was a pointer, one of the dog world's aristocrats, but this was a caricature of the breed. Years had edged his face and muzzle with shades of gray. His hip bones jutted out in lopsided triangles. But it was his eyes that caught and held my attention. Calm and clear, they beheld me unwaveringly. I pointed to the dog. "Can you tell me about him?" The officer looked, then shook his head in puzzlement. "He's a funny one." Appeared out of nowhere and sat in front of the gate. We brought him in, figuring someone would be right down to claim him. That was 2 weeks ago, and we've heard nothing. His time is up tomorrow, he gestured helplessly. As the words sunk in, I turned to the man in horror. "You mean you're going to kill him?" "Ma'am," he said gently, "that's our policy. We don't have room for every unclaimed dog." I looked at the pointer again. The calm brown eyes awaited my decision. "I'll take him," I said. I drove home with the dog at the front seat beside me. When I reached the house, I honked the horn twice. I was helping my prize out of the car when Dad shuffled onto the front porch. "Ta-da! Look what I got for you, Dad," I said excitedly. Dad looked, then wrinkled his face in disgust. If I had wanted a dog, I would have gotten one. And I would have picked out a better specimen than that bag of bones. "Keep it. I don't want it." Dad waved his arm scornfully and turned back toward the house. Anger arose inside me. It squeezed together my throat muscles and pounded into my temples. "You'd better get used to him, Dad. He's staying." I like her method. Dad ignored me. "Did you hear me, Dad?" I screamed. At those words, Dad whirled angrily. His hands clenched to his side. His eyes narrowed and blazing with hate. We stood glaring at each other like duelists, when suddenly the pointer pulled free from my grasp. He wobbled toward my dad and sat down in front of him. Then slowly, carefully, he raised his paw. Dad's lower jaw trembled as he stared at the uplifted paw. Confusion replaced the anger in his eyes. The pointer waited patiently. Then Dad was on his knees, hugging the animal. Oh, excuse me if I get teary-eyed. It was the beginning of a warm and intimate friendship. Dad named the pointer Cheyenne. Together, he and Cheyenne explored the community. They spent long hours walking down dusty lanes. They spent reflective moments on the banks of streams, angling for tasty trout. They even started to attend Sunday services together, Dad sitting in a pew while Cheyenne lying quietly at his feet. Dad and Cheyenne were inseparable throughout the next 3 years. Dad's bitterness faded, and he and Cheyenne made many friends. Then late one night, I was startled to feel Cheyenne's cold nose burrowing through our bed covers. He had never come into our bedroom at night. I woke Dick, put on my robe, and ran into my father's room. Dad lay in his bed. His face was serene, but his spirit had left quietly sometime during the night. 2 days later, my shock and grief deepened when I discovered Cheyenne lying dead beside Dad's bed. I wrapped his still form in the rag rug he had slept on. As Dick and I buried him near a favorite fishing hole, I silently thanked the dog for the help he had given me in restoring Dad's peace of mind. The morning of Dad's funeral dawned overcast and dreary. This day looks like the way I feel, I thought, as I walked down the aisle to the pews reserved for family. I was surprised to see the many friends Dad and Cheyenne had made filling the church. The pastor began his eulogy. It was a tribute to both Dad and the dog who had changed his life. And then the pastor turned to Hebrew chapter 13, verse 2. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by this some have entertained angels without knowing it. I often thanked God for sending me that angel, he said. For me, the past dropped into place, completing a puzzle that I had not seen before, the sympathetic voice that had just read the right article, Cheyenne's unexpected appearance at the animal shelter, his calm acceptance and complete devotion to my father, and the proximity of their deaths. And suddenly I understood. I knew that God had answered my prayers after all. Life is too short for drama or petty things, so laugh hard, love truly, forgive quickly. Live while you are alive. Forgive now those who make you cry. You might not get a second chance. God answers our prayers on His time, not ours. God doesn't give us what we can handle. He helps us handle, stands with us, gets us through what we are given. In other words, God's grace keeps pace with what we face. They mention 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9, and I'm going to read that. Verse 9. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is perfected in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, I will rather boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Oftentimes, we forget what our elders have gone through prior to us. And sometimes our children, they get wrapped up in what is going on. That adults, their parents become a nuisance. Parents don't ever mean to become a nuisance to their children. We are parents. We are here to, as they're young, discipline them. As they get older, we are here to continue to guide them. And then as children get older, they become in their ways. I was admired by this woman who chose to take her dad into her house. That's a challenge. Because as people do get older, they can be ornery, or they might not listen to the doctor's orders and all of that. We had a neighbor that we took care of after his wife passed, and he was like that. He didn't want to listen to the orders, and I would go over. He said he didn't know how to do his eye drops, and I had to do some tough love, because I said, you need to do this. And eye drops are hard to do. I've had to do that for myself. And so I finally had to step back and give him tough love. He didn't have a pet. All he had was our family. And so here I was trying to be a mom, working and all this other stuff. And like this woman, it became tough. But we kept trying. And we reached out to his family to make sure that they would come and visit. But he was becoming very angry, very ornery. And you could see it, he was unhappy. And I've seen it with some other elderly people. They say they don't want. What they want is companionship. What they want is somebody to care. Now, he was a lumberjack in this story. He could no longer do that. He took pride in his work. There are some things I can't do. I mean, I'm not as old as that gentleman. I'm 62. But when I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, so much changed in my life. I felt like I had no value. And there's so many other dynamics in there. But that's what happens to us when a part of our past is taken away. Things that we were proud of, things that gave us purpose. You know, it used to be my daughters would tell me that I shouldn't, not all of them, by the way, would say, you got to be careful, not share so much. And this is when Facebook was first coming out. You shouldn't share so much about your faith. And I said, why? That's who I am. They said, because it turns people off. And you know what? Even on YouTube, it might turn some listeners off. But I'll tell you what, my faith is because I trust God. I do not judge others on their faith. I understand a lot of dynamics of why people believe different ways, so I'm open to it. But for me, this is what I believe. So if somebody tells me I shouldn't talk so much about God, well, do I want to turn around and say, well, you shouldn't talk so much about this subject that I might not agree with? I don't judge people on their values, but I do think with this story that was just read, the one thing that we have done is we have judged one another based on age, based on seeing somebody angry for what we don't understand. It doesn't matter the age. I've seen some people my age and younger who are hurting deep inside. I've experienced people yelling, and I understood what's causing that anger. You know what's causing anger in this world? People are not reaching out. People are not compassionate. People are not helping. They're leaving people kind of like, deal with it. You know, people don't always cause their misfortune. Misfortune finds them sometimes. This gentleman, life took over. He worked hard. He became old. He became ornery. And even though he didn't want that dog needed him as much as he needed that dog. So as you encounter people that are angry, understand they have a history, and they probably have a wealth of information that would be amazing to listen to. And as our world changes, where there's a lot of anger out there, where there's a lot of blaming back and forth, take responsibility for your part of it. Because people can't defend themselves if you're going to just criticize them, or if you're going to get angry, if you're not going to embrace them and help them along their journey until it's their time to leave Earth. I hope this story was inspiring to you. It brought back some other things that I had to do, and I'll tell you, it brought back also, my mom had Huntington's disease. And one of the things that we all did not understand as we got older and closer to before she passed is the dynamics of Huntington's disease and what it does. And I grew up with a lot of dysfunction, but as I became a teenager and into my young adult life, there were things that were just not understandable. And I had to learn about it. Yet there was still some hurt within. But as we learn about what is going on in the lives of others, and it could be health issues, you learn to realize that we are all here on this earth for a purpose. Sometimes their purpose is for a short time and then illness takes over. Sometimes we're here for a purpose and then some people go and serve in different capacities and then they get burnt out. Whether lately it's healthcare, they're burnt out. Our military individuals. There's other places, even ministry can burn you out. But they serve as they're called. And when they reach a point of exhaustion and fatigue, they have to step back. Don't be mad at them when they do that, because you're here to live in the moment. Let's not push people to the point of exhaustion that they want to quit their jobs, quit doing nice things for people and becoming a hermit. As individuals, we have an opportunity to make a difference. And I hope that not only for you, but for myself, that these are things that I keep in mind as I go about my days. Folks, don't judge, but do love and do care. And when you're having a bad day, acknowledge it. And then pick yourself back up and know that tomorrow is another better day. And you don't have to wait another day. When you acknowledge what happened, just kind of like shake it off and start fresh at that moment. I hope you have a great day, and I hope your new year is going fabulously. Be inspired, folks. God bless you.